Of boxing's many problems that it suffers from in this current age, one of its worst, and you could say it was kind of an inevitability because of the way the internet has compartmentalized attention, the way boxing is now very much diluted. I wouldn't quite say an underground sport. You've got some big figures, but there's nowhere near just the public awareness of boxing because so much hides behind paywalls. Is the way in which fighters and champions started to become brands. They started to become fashion labels. Fighter, promoter, manager, they all became conscious. Hang on, we can milk our position here. We can say we're better than we actually are. We can delay fights that need to be made. And we can start coming up with this crazy position that I've now earned the right to choose who and when I fight. You see fighters who aren't even that big do this. They get a belt, they start trying to make their own promotions. It's all backwards. The boxer is deciding when boxing goes forward. It's supposed to be the other way around. Canelo Alvarez is probably still the face of boxing, as we call it. Now, to somebody uninitiated in the sport, I'd suspect that they'd think, well, surely a prerequisite of that is that you're the best fighter on the planet out of the 17 weight divisions. As we know, that isn't the case. It's more of a popularity contest. So long as you haven't really bitten the dust like, say, Joshua did when he got stopped against Ruiz at heavyweight. Because Canelo's last real significant loss against Bivol, it was a points loss. It was up at light heavyweight where he was chasing greatness, as we like to say. It wasn't that damaging. And then he's just, of course, got such a library of big fights with very famous common opponents. It's just allowed him to stay afloat. And more importantly, for those who will actually go and buy a ticket and watch him, it continues to perpetrate this idea that somehow he's still the man. Resumes really are a different topic for another video, but we're talking about right now, Naoya Inoue, Terence Crawford and Alexander Usyk are more significant, better fighters than Canelo Alvarez at this precise moment. Now, I know some people will go, well, hang on, they didn't sell that much. How many pay-per-view buys did they do? But you see, this exactly highlights the problem I'm talking about. That's the business side of things. That's money. That's not meaning. It's the same as talking about how many Mickey D's were sold. Does that matter? Does that mean McDonald's is the best restaurant in the world? I think we all know the answer to that question. And so going back to this whole idea of supposedly having earned the position to choose who and when you fight, it doesn't seem, certainly not in the immediate future, that we're going to get Canelo Alvarez against David Benavidez. It's not necessarily a fight that I was really looking forward to, but I can't pretend that I haven't heard the word Benavidez linked with Canelo for like the past 2 years. This very much does seem like that before the first Golovkin fight, we've had this privileged delay, possible avoidance to a guy who is an outstanding contender. Again, it's the boxer running boxing, not the other way around. Sure, we might still get the fight sometime in the future, but the reason I put the word did in the title is that as soon as fights make sense, you've got to make them. There's no two ways around it. There's no such thing in terms of marinating a fight, in terms of it improving the flavour. No, all that happens is the price will get hiked up. You get an overinflated event, you get a diminished fight. Fighters' primes do not last that long, and I think I've made the point as well in another video that I almost think on a subconscious level, if fighters are allowed to just play around on the chessboard and go in whichever direction they want, and then finally go, okay, let's come and fight, there's not going to be the same fire there. It wasn't about putting everything on the line. It was hopping around, messing about, and then going for one last rodeo when it suited you. It just saps the passion from the sport. So Eddie Reynoso, a long-time trainer of Canelo Alvarez, has of course come to his man's defence, but the rationale just really doesn't hold up to scrutiny. He spoke about Lennox Lewis never fighting Riddick Bowe. He spoke about Julio Cesar Chavez never getting around to fighting Terry Norris. But these are kind of unique cases. I doubt they were waiting in the wings for as long as Benavidez has been. And the other thing is, during those times, in the 90s and the 80s, it was much more competitive. If you didn't fight one guy, it was usually because you were preoccupied with someone else. There's a lot of dead wood at middle and super middle. Benavidez has been the obvious choice, so you can't begin to compare eras like Reynoso has tried to do there. Now, all you're hearing in that speech or reading on the screen is just the effects of privilege. Overly privileged, you command too much money, you can skirt around and make up the choices or drop a belt and say, I won't be dictated to, but all it really comes down to is a duck, because the sport is supposed to dictate who and when you fight. In contrast, when you look at former promoter De La Hoya, his willingness to fight whoever, when it mattered, was tremendous. That really is the benchmark for how boxing should operate when it comes to our top guys. In about 16 months, he fought Trinidad and Quarte and Mosley. Just think about that, in 16 months. You'd never get that today. Certainly if not someone like De La Hoya was in his prime now, he'd be completely like a brand. He'd be nowhere near as active. There'd be all kinds of Twitter wars. For whatever you got to say about Oscar, the way he just met everybody at the critical hour, you've got to applaud him. It's like a big male lion in his prime going over the African savannah. You're going to inevitably bump into other males and they're going to challenge you. And then you've got to meet that challenge. There's no escaping it. With what's happening here with Canelo and Benavidez, it's like Canelo's prancing around as a lion, and then he's maybe aging a little bit, and he could possibly get overthrown. And then we're just picking him up from his natural habitat, putting him further a few miles elsewhere with some, say, African hunting dogs that he can easily dominate. That's what's happening. It's totally manufactured. It's not existing in that authentic realm that's always changing and always nipping at your heels of who is the best. The fact he was pushed so hard in many of his significant fights was one of the big reasons why I didn't digest the whole pound-for-pound king malarkey 2 or 3 years ago. But right now, the real lack of integrity in his career and the direction in which it's going, I really don't know where I'd rate him pound for pound. He is still undoubtedly an excellent fighter who's had a very good career, which really stands out for its longevity, certainly among the Mexican greats. But with the more frequent observation that this guy is past his prime, you do kind of get the sense that Canelo is going to try and ride out the rest of his career without suffering too many bumps if he can help it. What I want to know, though, is what you think about what I just said. Spoons up.